From sweeping the changing room to sweeping the boardroom. That won't happen these days, will it? They've surely got carpet in the boardroom nowadays. So let me try that again. From sweeping the changing room to hoovering the boardroom, West Ham United have announced Mark Noble's new role as sporting director of the football club. I'm sorry, listen, it's been all negative all week with this David Moyes stuff. I just thought we could have a bit of a laugh for 30 seconds before we move on to the more serious chit-chat about Mark Noble's new role. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss in this video. What is his new role? According to the club, how I interpret it as well. We'll take a little look at other examples around the Premier League of people in similar positions to what Mark Noble's going into. Also, is he even experienced for this job? He's gone straight from playing football just 6 months ago into this new role. Is he experienced, or is it a little bit jobs for the boys kind of thing? We'll be taking a look at how this will impact David Moyes. Well, we won't really. There's two reasons. There's many reasons this could impact David Moyes, but there's only two I'm going to discuss. A good one and a bad one, but they're pretty major in my opinion. And we're going to finish up with why I think this is a crucial and a good one appointment for West Ham United ahead of next summer. So, let's start with what Mark Noble's new role is, because it's on my phone and I want to put my phone down. But this is a little bit of what the club said in their statement earlier today. They said, his West Ham United career is now set to continue in a newly created position, which will see Noble work closely in support of manager David Moyes, as well as working with the board of directors, providing input, advice and assistance. I mean, input and advice, is that not the same thing? Maybe advice is when they ask for help and advice. Maybe input is when you just give advice without them asking, really. I don't know. Anyway, across all aspects of the football operation. This will include academy development, player recruitment and player and staff well-being, with a particular focus on ensuring players both progressing through the ranks and new to the football club are nurtured in the West Ham United football philosophy and values. Mark Noble will begin his role on the 2nd of January as he doesn't want to be associated with today's shambles, and he's hoping by then David Moyes will have turned it round. It doesn't say that. I've made that up. I've made that last sentence up. It stopped at philosophy and values. Do you know the bit that sounded good? All that buzzwords. That's where it stopped. I added the last bit in. It's just a joke. It's nothing serious. Anyway, so that's what the club have said Mark Noble's new role is, which is very broad, isn't it? They might have just written he's going to do everything to do with the football club. Think up something to do with West Ham. Yeah, Mark Noble's going to be involved in that. I think, bar medical, I think they're covering all bases there. But in all fairness, that's how I interpret it to be anyway, the sporting director. Now, it varies from club to club, even within the Premier League as well as the Bundesliga. Over in Germany, it's a little bit more of an important role, I think. I wouldn't say it's a new role to English clubs, but we certainly don't have them. And as it said in the West Ham statement, it's a newly created role. They've created this job just for Mark Noble. Which leads you on to the question, well, is he experienced, or are they simply making up a job so Mark Noble can work at West Ham United? But this is the thing with sporting directors, and we'll get on to the terminology sporting directors in just a minute. But this is the thing with them. There's no academic qualification. And Mark Noble, in the statement, it spoke about how Mark Noble's going to Harvard to do a 5-day on-site course to get a qualification. But there is no academic qualification for this role. And sporting directors in the Premier League all come from different backgrounds. You know, you look at Ross Wilson at Rangers, his background is in operations. You look at Edwards at Liverpool, when he was at Liverpool, his background is in analysis. You've got Webber at Watford, one of the more known directors of football. His background's in football, so there is no set route into this role as such. In the Bundesliga, however, majority of them have a strong background in football. Usually they've played at a high level of the game, and they've just gone into it, and just rather than going into coaching or management, they've gone into a hands-off approach, working off the pitch as a sporting director of the football club. So is Mark Noble qualified? I mean, yes, because there isn't really a qualification per se. It's more being suited to the role and what the role demands. And everybody's got their different interpretation of what you need out of this role. And for myself, it's working with people is pretty key. I know it sounds so simple, but the amount of relationships you need as a sporting director is obscene with the agents, with your scouting team, with your manager, with the boardroom. They're the person in the middle of your football web, almost, that they are more important than the manager. They're supposed to be. And I would argue that they're more important than the people in the boardroom. They could possibly be the most important person at a football club. And they're getting more and more praise this day, especially in the English game. If you now look over the last 3-4 seasons, if I ask you to name a successful English football club in the last couple of seasons in the Premier League, who would you name? Well, if you've just said Newcastle, if you've just said Chelsea, you've just said Brighton, you've just said Brentford, this all applies to those football clubs because there's people in those positions there. Darren Fletcher's gone into one at Manchester United earlier on in the year as well. He's gone into, it's a different terminology, but we'll get on to that one. So Mark Noble's going to be responsible for overseeing the recruitment of players. Now that doesn't necessarily mean he's picking the players. It might just mean that he's now managing Rob Newman, who's then managing the scouts, who's also managing the analysis department. So Mark Noble is essentially, in my opinion, now responsible for, I guess, micromanaging all the departments at the football club to some extent, delegating the jobs out to them and having the right people in the right places to do the right things. And it's a huge job. It's a massive gig, and it's going to come with huge expectation on Mark Noble. But is he right? Is he the right man for the job? Well, we don't know. We're not going to know until he starts carrying it out. But certainly this is a man that knows the football club. Now, while we speak about Mark Noble micromanaging people, you need to micromanage the apps on your phone and make sure that one of them is the One Football app, the best place to keep up to date with all your footballing news, including the big news around Mark Noble. It's a completely free app which you can download using the link in the description below, and when you load up for the very first time, it'll say, "Excusez-moi." It doesn't say that, it just says, "What's your favourite football club?" You then select West Ham, you select any competitions you wish to follow, including the likes of the Premier League. Then when you load it back up from then on after, you click on profile, everything is there for you. Then when you click on your West Ham badge, all you get is the West Ham news. That's it. You don't have to read about all the other clubs that dominate the likes of Sky Sports and the BBC. All you get is what you want to see. It's the #1 football app for the football fan, in my opinion. Anyway, let's get back to talking about Mark Noble. And there's a few examples of sporting directors in the Premier League that have played in the Premier League, ex-footballers in this role. We've already mentioned Darren Fletcher in Manchester United. Now, we don't know if he's going to be successful or not. He's new to the role. We'll have to wait and see. But one person that's been in it for a little bit longer, since 2019, and I would deem it successful so far, is Dougie Freeman at Crystal Palace. At the end of last season, Patrick Vieira is very keen to deflect any praise he gets and praise Dougie Freeman as well. And the relationship between the pair of them as to why it's been deemed quite a successful debut season for Vieira at Selhurst Park, playing good football. They've lowered the average age of the squad. I mean, they've got quite a young team now, brought in players that are young. That's only going to increase in value as well. It's been deemed a really successful 12 months at Selhurst Park, and Freeman has been a big part of that. And Vieira's spoken about how he deals with the recruitment. It means Vieira doesn't have to worry about it. He can focus on the footballing side of things. But also Vieira speaks about how important it is for him that Freeman has played and managed at the highest level in football as well. And for Vieira, having a footballing person above him is important, and that's why it works. Now, would Vieira work just as well with somebody that doesn't have that background that Freeman has? I don't know. Would he work with Edwards when Edwards was at Liverpool with that analysis background rather than a football one? We don't know, but what we do know works for Vieira is somebody with footballing experience. You have a look at Brighton as well, one of the more successfully run clubs in European football. You know, probably the most German-like club in the Premier League with the structure and the way they're set up. Obviously, they lost Dan Ashworth. He went to Newcastle United. Again, Newcastle United, one of the richest clubs in world football. So they're restructuring their club, and they identified one of the first people that they go get is somebody that's going to come in and manage the operation, and they identified Ashworth of Brighton and went and got him. The replacement at Brighton for one of these more successfully run clubs in European football is David Weir. Again, another player with loads of footballing experience. His background is in football. He's gone into Brighton and is now just overseeing the replacement of Graham Potter, who's gone to Chelsea. And now, speaking of Chelsea, they're now going after a sporting director or a director of football, and they're putting a lot of time and money and effort into getting them. Now, obviously, they tried to get the Salzburg one. That's fell through. They're being linked to Orta of Leeds United, who, again, he's overseen the Leeds United getting from the Championship, or from League One, into the Premier League as well. But Chelsea now are targeting Leverkusen Steiden as well, who is very, very data focused, but somebody else background in football as a footballer. He's only been in the role for a year at Leverkusen, but Chelsea are trying to get him in. They've had a huge spend up in the summer, and now they're trying to get somebody in that's going to have to work with Macaulay, who Potter took with him from Brighton, is involved in this sort of data and player recruitment side of things. So anyway, sporting directors, quite important. But what is a sporting director? Is it any different to a director of football or technical director? Well, no. According to Giles of Brentford, not me, it's not me that said this, I'm just relaying the message. Giles of Brentford, who's a director at Brentford, has said that the technical director, sporting director, and director of football are all the same role, just with different titles. And I think he worded it up as a job title extravaganza or something like that. But he working in football in the boardroom, a director of Brentford, said that basically it's the same roles and they all have very, very similar responsibilities. But this is the problem with sporting directors, that it differs from club to club. So what David Weir will have to do at Brighton will be different to what Martin Noble does at West Ham, which will be different to what Darren Fletcher does at Man United, which is what Ralph Ragnick was meant to do. He was a director of football or sorts, or something very similar when he was at Red Bull Leipzig, wasn't he? You know, he went in there when they were worth a handful of million. Now they're worth over $1 billion. He saw that transformation before he quit to go be a manager, and then he went to Manchester United, of course, and the idea was he was going to move upstairs, and for whatever reason it hasn't happened. Now Fletcher has got that job instead. So there's plenty of examples in the Premier League already of former Premier League players in this role. So I don't really think Mark Noble is necessarily unqualified. It's just that it's about picking the right person for the right club as well. Because like I said, while Davy Weir might go on to be a success at Brighton, but it doesn't mean he'd be a success at another club as well. They're all different responsibilities. You have to take everything into consideration, including the likes of a budget, for example. Certainly I know, I can't remember his name, the director of football at Blackburn Rovers, and part of his responsibility is managing the medical team. Now, Mark Noble's, that's why I made a joke about Mark Noble not doing the medical team. It's at Blackburn, that is part of their responsibilities, because they've got a smaller budget. There's less people involved in that setup, so he's got to sort of oversee that side of things as well. But anyway, so to stop talking about other people who are just doing a very similar job to what Mark Noble does around the Premier League, or what Mark Noble shall do at West Ham. But I think the reason what I was trying to say is, you all know how important Ashworth was to Brighton, and now he's gone to Newcastle, now Weir's there and stuff. This is a huge, huge role. And it's also one that, you know, Premier League managers these days have, on average, 14 months in the job. That's the average life cycle of a Premier League manager today. You'd expect your sporting director to outlive him, possibly even 3-4 times. Like I said, Weir is now overseeing the recruitment policy. I can't remember the person's name, De Zagrebri, or how he pronounces his name. The former Shakhtar manager that's now at Brighton. Weir's been part of overseeing the recruitment process and replacing of Graham Potter, and he will probably outlast him as well. Just like Ashworth at Newcastle will probably outlast Eddie Howe. And that's the expectancy. Mark Noble, if it goes well, Mark Noble does his job correctly, will outlast David Moyes, and possibly the one after that, and possibly the one after that. And not only that, he'll be in charge of picking and identifying the replacement manager. Now, in German football, it's common that the sporting director is actually in charge of firing the current manager as well, and he's essentially the link between the boardroom and the managing staff, never mind the playing squad. So it'll be interesting to see how much responsibility Mark Noble has. I wouldn't be surprised if it's sort of not quite on a baby rein harness type thing and he gets let off a little bit. But certainly I'd be surprised if he was involved in the sacking of David Moyes. But speaking of David Moyes, there's one big reason and one negative reason I think that this is good and bad for Moyesy. Oh, better not call him that. Hopefully he's not tuning in, otherwise I'm going to be getting a swear word thrown in my direction. Anyway, the good one, let's have a little bit of positivity first, shall we? The good reason for David Moyes is because I think Mark Noble's a big fan David Moyes. I do feel like that whenever Mark Noble's been interviewed in the past. And often he is quite honest in these interviews. I often find that he perhaps doesn't call out managers or players, but he certainly hints at stuff. And when it comes to Moyes, he's very, very quick to sort of praise him for the transformation of the club. And assuming, and I think this is a fair assumption, assuming Noble is a big fan of David Moyes, bearing in mind, Mark Noble's spoken about how the last 2 seasons have been his best 2 seasons as a player, blah, 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 blah. Assuming that Moyes is Noble's a big fan of him, Moyes has now got a big voice in the boardroom on his side. Now, I know he doesn't start the role until the 2nd of January. However, I think if they were going to sack the manager, I think they'd pick up the phone to Mark Noble for a little bit of advice and see what he thought first of all as well. Consultancy, input and advice. There you go. You're going to get that from Noble. And if they don't ask for advice, Noble will give his input in regards to it. So I think Moyes might find himself with one of his biggest fans in the boardroom at the club. But one of the negativities, and this is what I spoke about in the other video, I said ironically, in the past I've not been keen on sacking managers because the club's structure just isn't there. More has to change. Rather than you sack the manager, but the same problems remain often. The player recruitment remains poor. From Bilic to Moyes back to Pellegrini, the player recruitment generally remained poor. When we sacked Pellegrini, the whole scouting team left with them as well. So that infrastructure within the club just was not there. And I joked ironically that David Moyes has helped put that infrastructure in place, which means it's easier to sack David Moyes now because actually all you're doing is sacking the manager and the coaching team, but the rest, everything else stays in place. The medical team stays there, the scouting team stays there, the analysis team stays there, nothing else changes. The amount of people you have to sack now at West Ham's reduced drastically now that Moyes is in charge compared to previous regimes. And this is just another layer of that, actually. Having a sporting director, whether it's Mark Noble or not, having a sporting director at the club, I think just adds that extra strand of the West Ham DNA, if you like, that extra piece of infrastructure between the boardroom and the coaching staff, that actually there's more stability at the club now. Because Mark Noble should be the longevity of the club. Like I said, he should be outlasting these managers in 10 years' time. Who at the club on the 2nd of January 2023 onwards, who at the club will be here in 10 years' time? Now, there will be plenty of them, we don't know. Okay, there'll be plenty of people at that club then will be here in 10 years, we don't know. They might work in the media team, they might work it might be a chef, it might be the kit man. There'll be plenty of people that do that 10-year stint that we just don't know and we'll never know about. But in terms of the ones in the public eye, if you were to go into the club's website and go into staff, that list of people, who will be here in 10 years? Mark Noble. Now, some people might make a case for Kevin Nolan or one or two of the players retiring and becoming part of but you know what I mean. In their current jobs, Noble is probably the only one that should be here in 10 years' time. Moyes won't be. Like I said, Nolan may get promoted. We don't know. But it'll be Mark Noble. And this is what's important for the club, I think, having that longevity. And this ties in why I think that this is a crucial appointment ahead of next summer. Because next summer, I think it's fair to say, a lot of us expect the club to be sold, or at least a large part of the club to be sold. April time, David Sullivan and David Gold can sell their shares of the club and not have to pay any profit to the stadium owners. That 10-year contract, that 10-year agreement clause in the rental agreement with the stadium, that they have to turn over any profit to the stadium owners, that's gone. That is gone. So next summer is the first summer we may see big change. We've already saw a big change. We've already saw a big investment from Daniel Kretinsky. Is he looking to pursue more of the club? Is someone else looking to come on board and get Sullivan out? We'll have to wait and see. But if that does happen next summer, I think having Mark Noble, somebody that we can relate to, somebody that's going to outlast the board members, that continuity, that longevity. Now, there might be new owners that come in and look at Mark Noble and say, not experienced enough, not good enough, out. That's their decision. But I think having somebody in place before they arrive can only be a good thing. Like I said, you look at what's happening at Chelsea at the minute. The new owners are scratching around trying to find somebody. Now, of course, Mariner, however you say her name, she was there. And she decided to leave as well, and she was, damn good at her job by all means, by the sounds of it, at Chelsea. She was good at the negotiations, the player recruitment, but she's left. And you get this sense of desperation from the current Chelsea board, which is we need to get somebody in. Who we're going to get in? It's becoming a more and more important role in football, I think. And I think the English game's been a little bit behind the German game in that aspect. Now, the reason I keep speaking about the Bundesliga, you might be listening to this thinking, hang on a minute, flipping Napoli's had this in place for years. Sporting's had this in place. I don't know. I don't know enough about Spanish football, Portuguese football, Italian football. I don't know enough. But certainly the Bundesliga one, I've still got very limited knowledge, but at least I've got some tiny particles of knowledge. But they've been ahead of the English game in this sense for quite a while because they probably had to work a little bit harder with their money. They probably had to get their recruitment a little bit more spot on because they don't have as much money to spend. And I think this whole emphasis on getting the most out of your transaction when it comes to purchasing players is greater now than ever in football. And Mark Noble is a sporting director at West Ham as of the 2nd of January. Huge role, huge responsibilities. And I know everybody wishes him the best of success. Why wouldn't you? Not because it's Mark Noble, just because it's somebody that's now at the football club. And I praise his success as well because he's spoken before about his fear of ruining his legacy at West Ham. And this is why he was perhaps a little bit reluctant to go into coaching and then managing, because he refers to Slaven Bilic about how you can ruin your legacy at that football club pretty quickly if you get it wrong as a manager. But best of luck to him, and hopefully it's a success. Anyway, there's my blabbering on about Mark Noble being a sporting director of West Ham United. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to Hammers Chat. I'll catch you in a bit.